The smell of stale coffee and desperation usually hit me the moment I walked into the school library, but today it was different. Today it was the sharp, almost metallic tang of something new, something out of place. My name's Alex, and I'm just your average high school junior in a quiet suburban town you've probably never heard of, somewhere in Ohio. Most days, my biggest problem was figuring out how to balance AP Calc with enough time to actually enjoy my Xbox. But today, the library changed things. It started with Mr. Henderson, our history teacher, who was usually a walking encyclopedia of boring facts. He was at the main desk, looking like he'd just seen a ghost, whispering to Mrs. Babel, the librarian. Mrs. Gable, a woman who usually had the patience of a saint and the calm demeanor of a sleeping cat, was practically vibrating. Her perfectly coiffed gray hair looked like it had been run through a wind tunnel. I tried to act casual, heading straight for the graphic novel section, my usual hideout. But my ears were perked. Missing from the archives. Invaluable, I heard Mr. Henderson mumble. Mrs. Gable just kept shaking her head, her lips a thin line. It wasn't like them to be so flustered. Our school library wasn't exactly Fort Knox. Most of the valuable stuff was old yearbooks and a first edition of To Kill a Mockingbird that no one was allowed to touch. I grabbed Saga, Volume 9, pretending to be engrossed, but I kept an eye on them. Mr. Henderson was gesturing vaguely towards the back of the library, towards the restricted access section, where they kept old town records and dusty historical documents. I'd only been back there once for a research project on local railroad history, and it was mostly just old maps and brittle newspaper clippings. Later that day in history class, Mr. Henderson was even more off than usual. He kept staring out the window, occasionally clearing his throat, his usual booming voice reduced to a hesitant mumble. All right, class, today we were going to talk about the civil rights movement, but let's just read Chapter 7 for homework. He dismissed us 10 minutes early, which usually would have been cause for celebration, but the weird vibe was contagious. Even the class clown Mike just packed up quietly. After school, I usually walked home with my best friend Sam. He's the kind of guy who can make a grocery list sound exciting. "Dude, what's up with Henderson?" Sam asked, kicking a pebble down the sidewalk. He was acting like someone stole his lunch money and then burned his house down. "I heard him and Mrs. Gable talking in the library," I admitted, lowering my voice. "Something about something invaluable missing from the archives." Sam stopped, his eyes widening. "No way. Like the old town charter? The one signed by like a founding father's cousin or something?" He was always obsessed with local legends. "Could be," I shrugged. "But what would anyone want with that stuff? It's not like it's a treasure map." We talked about it for a bit, speculating wildly. Maybe it was some high-stakes heists like in the movies, only instead of diamonds they were stealing ancient tax forms. It sounded ridiculous, so we quickly moved on to discussing the upcoming district soccer tryouts. But the feeling lingered. That metallic tang from the library, the look on Mr. Henderson's face. It wasn't just a missing book. It felt bigger. The next morning, things got even stranger. When I walked into homeroom, Miss Davis was there, looking grim. She announced that the school library would be closed for the foreseeable future due to unforeseen maintenance issues. Everyone groaned, but I noticed Miss Davis kept glancing at Mr. Henderson's empty desk. He wasn't there. During lunch, I saw a police car parked subtly behind the school, near the back entrance that led to the old boiler room and storage area. It wasn't flashy, no sirens, just a regular patrol car, but it was definitely there, and it definitely wasn't normal. Our town was small. Police usually only showed up if someone parked illegally in the faculty lot, or if there was a really bad fight. I nudged Sam. "Dude, see that?" He followed my gaze. "Whoa, okay, so it's not just a missing textbook, is it?" "Definitely not," I agreed. "And Mr. Henderson isn't here." That afternoon, I decided to do a little low-key investigation. Not because I thought I was some kind of detective, but mostly because I was bored and genuinely curious. After school, instead of heading home, I circled around the back of the library building. The maintenance issue sign was up, but a side door, one that led to a narrow hallway with a few administrative offices and a seldom-used back exit, was ajar. Just a crack. I hesitated. My mom always told me to mind my own business, and usually that was solid advice. But a crack in a door is practically an invitation, right? Taking a deep breath, I pushed it open just enough to slip inside. The hallway was dim, the air heavy and still, smelling faintly of old paper and dust. I walked quietly, my sneakers squeaking just a little on the lineal. I crept towards the main library area, but before I got there, I heard voices coming from one of the administrative offices. It was Miss Davis and a man I didn't recognize. His voice was low and gruff, definitely not a teacher. "Perimeter secure?" asked. "As much as it can be, detective," Mrs. Gable replied, her voice tight. "This is a school, not a bank vault, and we still haven't heard from Mr. Henderson." Detective. Okay, so it was serious, and Mr. Henderson was still missing. A cold knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't just about some old documents anymore. It felt bigger. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to make out more. "We believe it happened sometime Sunday night," the detective continued. "No signs of forced entry. Whoever it was, they knew the layout, and they knew what they were looking for." "But why?" Mrs. Gable sounded exasperated. "Those documents, they're historically significant, yes, but they have no real monetary value. Unless—" The detective sighed. "Unless it's not about the money, Miss Davis, or at least not directly. We're looking into local collectors, historical societies, anyone with a particular interest in these specific archives. And we're going to need to talk to every single person who had access to that section." I felt a jolt. Every single person who had access. I was one of them, thanks to that railroad project last semester. I remember Mr. Henderson showing me how the old key system worked for the archives. It was a big, clunky brass key stored in a small locked box behind the main desk with a sign-out sheet. I silently backed away, my heart thumping. This was way more than I bargained for. I needed to get out of there. As I turned to leave, my foot snagged on something. I stumbled, catching myself on a filing cabinet, but not before a small, framed photo on top clattered to the floor. It was a picture of Mrs. Gable with a younger woman, probably her daughter. I quickly picked it up, putting it back in place, my hands shaking a little. As I did, my gaze fell on the surface of the filing cabinet. It was old, metal, and dusty, but right there, near the edge, was a faint, almost invisible smear of something dark. I leaned closer. It looked like oil or grease. It was a dark, thick residue, and it didn't look like dust. It was too concentrated, too uniform, and it had a faint metallic smell, almost like the one I'd noticed in the library earlier, but stronger, mixed with something else. Something like old machinery. My mind started putting things together. The police car by the boiler room, the maintenance issues, the archive access, and that weird smell. It was a long shot, but what if the perpetrator didn't use the front door? What if they came in through the back, through the boiler room? I decided not to go home right away. Instead, I walked around to the very back of the school building, past the dumpsters and the overgrown bushes. There was a rusted metal door, usually padlocked, leading into the boiler room. It was old, barely used. Today, though, the padlock was dangly open, broken. The chain looked freshly snapped. My curiosity was battling with a healthy dose of fear. This was definitely stepping over the line of mind your own business. But a crack in a door is practically an invitation, right? I pushed the heavy metal door open. The air inside was warm and damp, smelling of old pipes and something acrid, almost like burnt rubber. The boiler room was a cramped space, filled with massive, ancient machinery, pipes crisscrossing the ceiling and a dusty concrete floor. There was a narrow, steep stair of stairs leading up to a small landing, and from there, another door that I knew led into the lower level of the school, near the administrative offices. I scanned the floor, my eyes searching, and then I saw it. A faint trail of the same dark, greasy residue I'd seen on the filing cabinet. It wasn't a lot, just tiny smudges, almost indistinguishable from the general grime of the boiler room, but it was there, leading from the broken door towards the stairs. And then, tucked away behind a stack of old, unused pipes, I saw something else. A small, dark glove. It looked like a work glove, maybe for heavy machinery. It was partially covered in the same dark grease. Okay, this was definitely not normal. An old work glove, a broken padlock, a trail of grease leading from a rarely used entrance into the school, and valuable documents missing? This wasn't just a random break-in. This felt specific, and the fact that Mr. Henderson was missing too made it even more unsettling. I didn't touch the glove. I didn't want to mess up any evidence. I backed out of the boiler room slowly, pulling the door shut behind me, making sure it looked exactly as I'd found it. My mind was racing. Who would use the boiler room? Someone who knew the school's hidden access points? Someone who probably worked here or used to? I needed to tell someone. But who? The police? I was just a kid. They'd probably just tell me to go home. Miss Davis and the detective seemed to already be on it, but they didn't know about the boiler room or the grease. Or maybe they did and just hadn't announced it. But if they did, why was the padlock still dangling open? Here's the third part. I walked home, my head buzzing, completely forgetting about Sam and soccer tryouts. My mom asked how my day was, and I mumbled something about it being fine. I didn't want to worry her. Besides, what would I even say? Mom, I think I just found a clue in a possible school heist involving historical documents and a missing teacher? She'd probably send me to bed early for reading too many detective novels. I decided to do some online research that night. Not about the case specifically, but about the old documents that were reportedly missing. Mr. Henderson had mentioned them during my railroad project, the Founder's Ledger. It was a handwritten book from the late 1800s containing detailed financial records of the town's founding families, including their land purchases, business dealings, and supposedly every single piece of property they ever owned, right down to the fence posts. It wasn't valuable for its contents in a general sense, but it was a crucial piece of local history. As I scrolled through dusty digital archives, I stumbled upon something interesting. An article from the local historical society's newsletter from about 5 years ago. It mentioned a lengthy, ongoing legal dispute involving one of the town's oldest families, the Blackburns. They owned a huge, decrepit piece of land on the edge of town, the old Blackburn estate, which had been abandoned for decades. The article vaguely referenced a boundary dispute with the town over a valuable section of marshland that was supposedly rich in a rare mineral deposit discovered during some environmental survey. The town claimed the land based on old maps, but the Blackburn family insisted it was theirs, going back generations. The article said the dispute was in legal limbo, waiting for definitive proof of original ownership. A chill went down my spine. Definitive proof of original ownership. The Founder's Ledger. The Blackburns. Could it be connected? What if the ledger contained the definitive proof someone needed for that land dispute? And what if Mr. Henderson, being the history buff he was, knew something about it? The next day at school, the library was still closed. Mr. Henderson was still absent. Miss Davis looked even more stressed. I debated going to her, but I still felt like I needed more than just a greasy glove and a hunch. I needed something concrete. During lunch, I saw Mrs. Gable walking across the courtyard, looking utterly miserable. Her usual brisk walk was a slow shuffle. I decided to approach her. She was a kind woman, and maybe, just maybe, she knew something. "Mrs. Gable," I said, trying to sound respectful. She jumped, startled, then smiled weakly. "Oh, Alex, what can I do for you?" I heard about the library and Mr. Henderson. Is he okay?" Her smile vanished. "We don't know, honey. The police are investigating. It's all very upsetting." I took a deep breath. "Mrs. Gable, I was in the library yesterday, after school. The side door was open." Her eyes widened. "I didn't mean to snoop, I saw some things. I saw some dark, greasy stuff on a filing cabinet near the back offices, and I found a broken padlock on the boiler room door, and a glove inside." She stared at me, her face paling. You went into the boiler room?" I just went in to look," I assured her, "and there was a trail of the same grease leading inside." Mrs. Gable put her hand over her mouth. "Oh my goodness! The police didn't mention anything about that. They were so focused on the front entrance." She looked around as if worried someone would overhear. "Alex, you need to tell Detective Miller right away. That's a huge lead." But What if it's connected to the Blackburn land dispute? I blurted out. The research was still fresh in my mind. The Blackburns. She paused, thinking. That case has been quiet for years, but the ledger, yes, that would be the key. It details all the original property lines. If someone wanted that land badly enough, she trailed off, a new, grim look on her face. You might be onto something, Alex. Mr. Henderson was very protective of the founder's ledger. He considered it a priceless piece of our town's history. He was the only one who even knew about some of the detailed notes within it, notes that weren't publicly cataloged. Suddenly, a thought struck me. Mrs. Gable, do you remember who signed out the archive key in the last few days? She frowned. The sign-out sheet? The police took it. But wait, Mr. Henderson himself signed it out on Sunday. He said he was going to do some extra cataloging. He often came in on Sundays. So Mr. Henderson was there, and he had the key. What if he wasn't missing because of the crime, but because he was involved? No, that didn't feel right. Not Mr. Henderson. He loved history too much. And who else would know about the specific details in the ledger, beyond what's generally known? She thought for a moment. Well, aside from Mr. Henderson, there was one person, Old Man Hemlock. He used to be the head librarian years ago. He was the one who originally cataloged most of that section, and he was absolutely obsessed with the Blackburn family history. He knew every detail, every rumor. He lives out in that old farmhouse on Willow Creek Road. Still. Hemlock. The name rang a bell. My grandpa used to talk about Old Man Hemlock being a bit eccentric, a local recluse, and Willow Creek Road was right near the Blackburn estate. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just tell the detective. I had a feeling about this, a bad feeling. If Mr. Henderson was in trouble, I had to help. And if Old Man Hemlock was involved, then it wasn't just some random thief. After school, I made an excuse to Sam about having to help my mom with something. I borrowed my mom's old bike, the one with the basket and the bell that jingled too much, and headed out towards Willow Creek Road. It was a long ride, past the edge of town where the houses thinned out and the woods grew denser. The air got cooler, and the tripping of crickets replaced the hum of traffic. Old Man Hemlock's house was exactly as my grandpa described it. A rambling, unpainted relic leaning precariously to one side, surrounded by a tangle of overgrown weeds and a rusty barbed wire fence. A single, weak light glowed from a window. My heart was pounding as I pulled the bike up to the fence. This was crazy. I was a kid. What was I doing? But then I thought of Mr. Henderson, always patient, always ready to explain some obscure historical fact, looking so worried in the library. I had to at least check. I pushed open the rickety gate, which groaned in protest, and walked up the uneven path to the front door. I raised my hand to knock, but before my fist even connected, I heard voices from inside. 2 voices. One was deep and raspy, definitely Old Man Hemlock. The other sounded familiar, faintly. I pressed my ear closer to the creaky wooden door. It should have been simpler, Hemlock's voice rasped. The boy was too nosy. I just wanted the ledger. This wasn't supposed to escalate. The boy. My blood ran cold. Mr. Henderson. He wouldn't give it up, old man, the second voice said, clearer now. And then it hit me like a cold shower. It was Mr. Henderson. His voice was strained, hoarse. He fought back, said it was irreplaceable. You tied him up, you lunatic. It was for the best, Hemlock snarled. He would have called the police. This land is rightfully ours. The ledger proves it. And with the new mineral deposits, it's worth a fortune now. I felt a surge of pure adrenaline. Mr. Henderson was alive, and Old Man Hemlock had him, and he was involved in the land dispute. Everything clicked into place. Hemlock, obsessed with the Blackburn family, knew about the ledger's specific contents, knew about the boiler room entrance from his days working there, and knew Mr. Henderson often worked on Sundays. I knew I couldn't just barge in. I was one high schooler against 2 adults, one of whom sounded pretty unhinged. I needed help fast.
I backed away silently, my mind racing. I pulled out my phone. My fingers fumbled as I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? A calm female voice asked. My name is Alex. I'm at Old Man Hemlock's house on Willow Hake Road. I think he's got Mr. Henderson, my history teacher, tied up. He stole the founder's ledger from the school library. He used the boiler room entrance. There's a broken padlock and a greasy glove there. He wants the land, the Blackburn estate land. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Can you repeat the address, Alex? And are you sure about this? Yes, I'm sure. It's the old Hemlock place. Please hurry. I heard them talking. Mr. Henderson sounded hurt. Stay calm, Alex. We're dispatching units now. Do not approach the house. Find a safe place and wait for the officers. Can you tell me what you're wearing? I described my clothes, then quietly hung up. I crept back towards the fence, ducking down behind a thick bush, my eyes glued to the farmhouse. Every second felt like an hour. I heard a distant siren, faint at first, then growing louder. The sirens grew louder, piercing the quiet of the evening. 2 police cruisers, lights flashing but sirens now silenced, turned off the main road onto Willow Creek. They pulled up to Hemlock's dilapidated gate. I stayed hidden, peeking through the leaves. I watched, my heart hammering against my ribs, hoping I hadn't made a mistake, hoping Mr. Henderson was okay. Police! Open up! One of the officers yelled, his voice firm. There was a muffled shout from inside, then the sounds of a struggle. The officers didn't hesitate. One of them kicked the door open with a loud, splintering crash.
I heard more shouts, a loud thud, and then, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute or two, the officers emerged. They had Old Man Hemlock in handcuffs, looking disheveled and furious. And behind them, a little unsteady but walking on his own, was Mr. Henderson. He had a bruise on his cheek and his shirt was torn, but he was walking. He was alive. Relief washed over me so strongly that my knees felt weak. I almost cried right there behind the bush. One of the officers spotted me. Alex? Is that you? I slowly emerged, feeling a little foolish for hiding. Yes, is Mr. Henderson okay? Mr. Henderson, seeing me, managed a weak but genuine smile. Alex, you brilliant, nosy kid! You saved my bacon! He looked utterly exhausted, but incredibly relieved. The police questioned me briefly, taking down my statement. I told them everything I'd seen and heard, from the weird smell in the library to the broken padlock and the conversation in the farmhouse. They were impressed, especially with the detail about the boiler room and the land dispute. Apparently, they had been focusing too much on a standard break-in and hadn't connected all the dots. My information about the specific contents of the Founder's Ledger and Old Man Hemlock's obsession with it was crucial. They recovered the Founder's Ledger from a dusty old chest in Hemlock's house. It was a beautiful, ancient book, thankfully unharmed. The next day, the news was all over the local papers and TV. Teenager helps solve library heist, locates missing teacher. My mom was mortified and incredibly proud all at once. My dad just kept shaking his head, grinning. Sam thought it was the coolest thing ever. Mr. Henderson was back at school a few days later, a little paler, but otherwise fine. He pulled me aside after class. Alex, what you did, it was incredibly brave and smart. You paid attention when no one else did. He handed me a crisp, new paperback. It was a first edition of a detective novel. For the future detective. I grinned. I wasn't planning on becoming a detective, but it felt good. The Blackburn land dispute finally got resolved in the town's favor thanks to the recovered Founder's Ledger, and the valuable marshland was preserved. Old Man Hemlock ended up in a facility, given his mental state, and the guy he'd hired to help with the break-in was also arrested. Life slowly went back to normal. The library reopened. The smell of stale coffee returned, comforting in its familiarity. My biggest worry was once again AP Calc. But every now and then, when I walked past the boiler room, or saw a police car, or even just smelled something faintly metallic, I'd remember.
I was just an ordinary kid. But for a little while, I'd been more than that. I'd been the one who accidentally stumbled onto a crime, and with some luck and a lot of curiosity, helped make things right. And that was pretty cool.